The Mongol sapper crouches beneath his cowhide screen, iron chisel in hand, working at the base of Kaifeng's massive stone wall. Around him, dozens of his comrades labor in the same silence, methodical, professional, hidden from the defenders above by shelters 3 layers thick, safe from arrows, safe from boiling oil, invisible. He has done this before, in Beijing, in Samarkand, in cities whose names are now only ash. The wall will fall. It always does. Then he hears it. A strange hissing, something metallic scraping against stone, descending through the gap in the shelter above him. He looks up. An iron sphere, the size of a man's head, drops on a chain. Someone shouts a warning. There is nowhere to run. The sphere detonates with a sound like the sky splitting open. The iron casing does not simply burst, it shatters into hundreds of razor-edged fragments, traveling faster than any arrow. Cowhide shelter, proof against stones, proof against fire, proof against everything the Jin defenders had thrown at it for 21 years, disintegrates. The fragments tear through armor, through flesh, through bone. When the smoke clears, nothing remains of the sappers or their shelter, not even a trace. The year is 1232. The greatest military machine in human history has met a wall it cannot break. The Mongol Empire under Ögedei Khan, son of Genghis, ruler of the largest contiguous land empire ever assembled, had been at war with the Jin dynasty of northern China for over 20 years. Beijing had fallen in 1215. The Jin capital relocated south to Kaifeng in Henan province, and the war ground on through years of devastation and attrition. By 1230, the end seemed inevitable. The Mongols had perfected siege warfare by incorporating captured Chinese and Persian engineers, men who taught them to build trebuchets, siege towers, and underground mining techniques that could bring down any wall in the known world. In 1232, the legendary general Subutai, veteran of campaigns from Korea to the gates of Vienna, architect of victories that had reshaped Eurasia, converged his forces on Kaifeng. 2 Mongol armies under Ögedei and his brother Tolu had already destroyed the main Jin field army at the Battle of Sanfeng-shan. When both commanders fell ill, Tolu dying shortly after, supreme command passed to Subutai. On the 8th of April 1232, his forces surrounded Kaifeng completely. Siege lines stretching 87 kilometers enclosed the city on every side. Inside those walls, over 1 million people, refugees, civilians, approximately 40,000 defenders under Emperor Aizong. Standard Mongol doctrine was clear: starve them, bombard them with trebuchets, mine the walls, wait for plague and despair to finish the work. Subutai had done this countless times, but the Jin engineers at Kaifeng possessed weapons he had never seen at this scale. Gunpowder had been known in China for centuries. Fire arrows, arrows with gunpowder packets attached, had been in use since at least the 11th century. Soft-shell bombs of paper or bamboo had terrified enemies across the region for generations. But these were psychological weapons, terror devices. They demoralized, they dazzled, they rarely killed in significant numbers. The Jin engineers at Kaifeng had made a single modification that would change the nature of warfare forever. They put the gunpowder inside cast iron. The weapon was called the Zhen Tian Lei,
the heaven-shaking thunder crash bomb. The elegance was devastating. Previous bombs with soft casings ruptured immediately when the powder ignited, releasing their pressure in a flash of flame and smoke. Iron casings were different. When gunpowder exploded inside cast iron, the expanding gas could not escape. Pressure built to hundreds of atmospheric levels until the metal itself failed catastrophically. The iron did not crack, it shattered into hundreds of jagged, irregular fragments traveling at lethal velocity in every direction simultaneously.
This was the world's first true fragmentation weapon, the direct ancestor of every hand grenade and artillery shell that would follow across the next 8 centuries of human warfare. Eyewitness accounts recorded that the explosions could be heard 30 miles away. The blast radius burned everything within a zone roughly the size of a small room. The iron fragments could penetrate Mongol lamellar armor completely, killing horses and men alike. The Jin deployed them with tactical intelligence. When Mongol siege engines approached the walls, thunder crash bombs launched from trebuchets obliterated them before they could be brought to bear. When Mongol sappers tried to undermine the walls under their famous protective cowhide screens, those shelters that had proven impervious to everything, Jin defenders lowered iron-chained thunder crash bombs directly into the excavation tunnels. Historical sources record that after such attacks, no traces of the victims remained. Nothing. But the Jin had a second weapon, one that worked not at range, but in the dark and at close quarters: the flying fire lance. These were tubes, bamboo or heavy paper, over 2 feet long, packed with a compound of gunpowder, sulfur, charcoal, saltpeter, iron fragments, and ground ceramic. When ignited, they shot jets of flame more than 10 feet forward, functioning essentially as proto-flamethrowers, while simultaneously projecting burning shrapnel in all directions. Jin infantry wielded them like flaming shotguns. Each soldier carried a small iron pot of hot coals at his belt to ignite the fuses. In one engagement during the siege, 450 Jin infantry armed with fire lances launched a surprise night assault into the Mongol encampment, killing hundreds before the Mongols could organize a coherent defense. The combination of these 2 weapons was psychologically crushing. The history of the Jin records that the thunder crash bomb and the fire lance were the only 2 Jin weapons the Mongols genuinely feared. Consider what that means. These were the same warriors whose horse archers had annihilated every army from the Pacific coast to the gates of Eastern Europe. They had crushed the Khwarezmian Empire, the Kievan Rus, the armies of Poland and Hungary. They had never met infantry that made them hesitate. At Kaifeng, they hesitated. Their protective equipment, the lamellar armor that had served them across a continent, became a liability against iron fragmentation. Approaching the walls was suicidal. Their most trusted engineering technique, the mined approach under cowhide, had been turned against them. Subutai, the greatest operational commander of the medieval world, was forced to adapt. He could not assault. He tightened the blockade instead and waited for starvation and plague to accomplish what his armies could not. The siege dragged through the brutal summer of 1232 and into a killing winter. Inside Kaifeng, supplies collapsed. Plague ravaged the packed population. People starved. By late 1232, Emperor Aizong recognized what was coming. He fled with his court to Kaizu, leaving General Kui Li to negotiate the surrender. On the 29th of May, 1233, more than a year after the siege had begun, Kui Li opened the gates. The Jin dynasty survived 2 more years. In 1234, a combined Mongol and Song force captured Kaizu. The dynasty was extinguished. But by then, the technological transformation was already irreversible. The Mongols, master adapters, the most effective military learners in history, immediately began incorporating gunpowder weapons into their own arsenal. Within decades, these innovations spread west through Mongol campaigns into the Middle East and toward Europe, beginning the long chain of transmission that would eventually reshape global warfare. The Thunder Crash bomb did not save the Jin dynasty, but it bought them time. It demonstrated for the first time in the era of Mongol conquest that revolutionary technology could check even the most formidable military force the world had ever produced. The age of gunpowder warfare had begun, and the world would never fight the same way again.